On the chilly evening of November 20th, 2001, in a peaceful Oklahoma City neighborhood, the usual quiet was suddenly broken by the sound of gunshots. Robert Andrew, a loving father and respected Baptist pastor, had just arrived home to pick up his children for Thanksgiving. As he parked by the garage, a woman met him with a strange request. She asked for his help moving a piece of furniture. Completely unaware of the danger, Robert agreed. As he lifted the heavy item, his hands occupied and his mind elsewhere, someone stepped out from the shadows. Robert Andrew was born in Enid, Oklahoma. Robert had two older brothers, Bill and Tim, and 8 years after his birth, the family welcomed their youngest member, Tom. Raised in a home grounded in honesty, hard work, and strong Christian values, Robert's parents provided a comfortable and loving environment for their children. Robert's childhood was peaceful, marked by playful antics with his brothers and regular visits to church. During his time in high school, Robert met a young woman named Brenda. This seemingly ordinary encounter would go on to change their lives completely, though they were unaware of it at the time. Brenda, born on December 16, 1963, was raised in a Christian household in a small town in Oklahoma. Brenda was known for her quiet, cheerful, and studious nature, quickly capturing Robert's heart. Their relationship blossomed into a beautiful romance, and after graduating from high school in 1980, Robert pursued a degree in advertising with a specialization in marketing at Oklahoma State University. Brenda, on the other hand, remained the same calm and sensible young woman who, despite working at a local bank, avoided social gatherings, smoking, or drinking. In 1984, as Robert neared the completion of his degree and deeply in love, he formally proposed to Brenda, adhering to the Christian values cherished by both families. The couple married on June 2, 1984, and their future seemed bright. However, shortly after their honeymoon, Brenda confided in her mother-in-law about her doubts regarding the decision, which might have been made too hastily. As time went on, Robert focused on his rising career, while Brenda worked at a bank. The couple seemed to live in harmony. 4 years later, Robert secured a promising job at the well-known local advertising and communications agency. During their free time, the couple enjoyed attending church and deepening their faith. Around this time, Brenda became close friends with a colleague whose husband, Rick, worked as a petroleum engineer in Oklahoma City. The friendship extended to both couples, leading to frequent dinners and gatherings at each other's homes. On December 23, 1990, Robert and Brenda welcomed their first child, Tricity. By then, the family lived in a spacious home in a respectable neighborhood. 4 years later, their second child, Parker, was born. Brenda then became a full-time mother, which marked a significant change for her, as her days were now spent at home while Robert excelled at his job and eventually became the senior vice president of the company. He managed the telecommunications accounts and was known for his deep expertise and dedication, earning the affection of both clients and colleagues. Additionally, Robert was a sought-after public speaker, and received numerous national industry awards. Outside of work, Robert's greatest concern and joy were his children. Yet, beneath the surface of their seemingly normal suburban life, some secrets were hidden. Over the years, Brenda began having various affairs. Although she initially kept these indiscretions well hidden, the growing rift between her and Robert became evident to those close to them. Robert was more affectionate towards Brenda than she was towards him. It was one of those relationships where they stayed together for the sake of the children. One incident that demonstrated Brenda's capacity for betrayal occurred in late October 1997. At that time, Rick, the engineer and husband of Brenda's friend from her bank days, filed for divorce. Despite the close relationship between the two couples, Rick and Brenda quickly embarked on an affair that lasted for 6 months. Next on Brenda's list was James Higgins, a shopkeeper from Oklahoma City. During their secret encounters, Brenda confided in him that she wished her husband would die so she could obtain his money and move on with her life. As their marriage continued to deteriorate, Robert and Brenda sought counseling from the pastors at the small Baptist church on the outskirts of town. Through this close contact with their faith, Robert eventually became a pastor at the church. His kindness, smile, and positive attitude quickly earned him the respect and admiration of the congregation, who saw him as a breath of fresh air for the community. Among these people was someone who would later play a crucial role in the story of Robert and Brenda's marriage. His name was James Pavitt. James was nearing his 40s when he married his second wife. At the time, James worked as a life insurance agent. His past held some intriguing details, such as his former career as a police officer in the Air Force. This included a stint at an Air Force base in South Korea in the late 1980s or early 1990s, during which he met the woman, who later became his second wife. Several witnesses claimed that James told them he had a secret job involving the elimination of targets. Despite these mysterious aspects of his past, James was an active member of the church, and by chance, he and Brenda began teaching together in Sunday school. This connection also led to a friendship between James and Robert. James, charming and eloquent, was considered fortunate in his marriage, as his wife trusted him completely. She remained as in love with him as on the first day, despite the years they had spent together. However, even this stability couldn't stop him from starting an affair with Brenda. Cunning and discreet, the two managed to keep their relationship a well-guarded secret. Over time, as they shared intimate conversations and flirtations, they discovered they had more in common than just their capacity for infidelity and deceit. Their true interests were much darker, and to their surprise and growing bond, they found they were willing to go to great lengths to achieve their desires, even if it meant executing a twisted plan. In March 2001, taking advantage of Robert's trust, the lovers convinced him to change his life insurance policy. With James as his new agent, Robert signed an $800,000 policy naming Brenda as the sole beneficiary. Not long after, during that summer, rumors began to spread, as it became increasingly difficult to ignore the amount of time James and Brenda were spending together. Within weeks, the Baptist church prohibited them from continuing to teach Sunday school. However, instead of becoming more discreet, they began to organize outings that included Brenda's children. Devastated by his wife's obvious infidelity and the betrayal of his friend, Robert tried to persuade Brenda to end the affair. But any attempt he made to salvage what was left of their love was met with complaints from her, who began criticizing him, especially for what she saw as his poor performance as a father. As a result, life at the Andrew household grew increasingly bitter. By September 2001, fully aligned with his lover's goals, James asked his wife for a divorce. Initially, James blamed their separation on her not getting along with his American family, but he later concocted more elaborate reasons, claiming that he was doing it to protect her due to issues related to his former Special Forces work. The divorce was finalized in September 2001. A few days later, as Robert was preparing to drive to fulfill his duties as a pastor and advertiser, he made a disturbing discovery and didn't hesitate to report it. An hour later, while Robert was trying to fix the problem with his car, he received a call from an unknown person informing him that his wife, Brenda, had just been in a car accident. Before rushing to the hospital, he decided to call and verify the information, quickly realizing it was a prank call. Apparently, the same person who had cut his brake lines wanted him to head to the hospital. Shortly after, Robert decided to remove Brenda as the sole beneficiary of his life insurance policy. He replaced her with one of his brothers, someone he trusted completely and knew would never do anything to harm his nieces and nephews. Convinced that the marriage was beyond repair, the marketing expert packed what he needed and left the family home. Meanwhile, significant events were unfolding. First, James purchased a gun from a local store. The second act was a fraudulent scheme orchestrated by the lovers. How they discovered the change in the insurance policy's beneficiary remains unclear, but once they learned of the new beneficiary, Brenda and James didn't back down. Instead, they created a new policy with a forged signature from Robert. On October 3, 2001, Brenda filed for divorce. Her bitterness during that time was so intense that she didn't hesitate to tell anyone who would listen how much she hated her still husband. In stark contrast, it seemed that the situation was causing the Baptist pastor Robert immense pain. This was evident during a conversation he had around that time with his mother-in-law. Robert tried to explain to her that he worked long hours, often spending extended periods away from home, to be the reliable provider he had promised Brenda he would be. Brenda, who enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle without limitations, accused him of being an absent father who was not available for his children. This was the state of their relationship by the end of October 2001. In early November of that year, a couple who lived next door to the Andrews decided to go on a short trip. Before leaving, they handed Brenda the key to their home for safekeeping. Unknowingly, the neighbors provided the lovers with the final piece they needed to complete what they believed to be the perfect plan. With the countdown underway, Brenda was a bundle of rage and anxiety. This was clearly demonstrated during a phone call she made late on the night of Monday, November 19, 2001, to the mother of one of her daughter's friends. Brenda couldn't stop talking about the disdain she felt for Robert, and the malice in her voice and words left her friend feeling a deep sense of unease. The next morning, Tuesday, November 20th, 2001, with every move meticulously planned, James asked his daughter if he could borrow her car, claiming he needed to take it to the shop for some adjustments. That afternoon, Robert drove to the family home to pick up his two children and take them to spend Thanksgiving at his parents' house. On the way, he called his friend Ronnie, as he didn't plan to stay long. He parked next to the garage. At that moment, Brenda asked him to help move a piece of furniture. Suddenly, James appeared from the shadows. While Robert, defenseless and with his hands occupied, was moving the furniture, the ex-military man swiftly pulled the trigger. The bullet struck Brenda's husband. Then, as later revealed by forensic investigation, it was Brenda who took the gun and delivered the second and fatal shot to her husband's chest. It is believed that Robert saw his attacker, but the shots were fatal enough to bring him down completely. The gunshots shattered the stillness of the neighborhood, but Brenda and James, undeterred, continued with their plan. Brenda, using a second firearm, shot herself in the arm. Immediately afterward, James slipped away to hide in the neighboring house. Meanwhile, Brenda called emergency services, her voice filled with feigned anguish, claiming that she and her husband had been attacked by masked intruders. Inside the neighbor's home, the darkness and his nerves betrayed James, causing him to break a shelf in the closet of the master bedroom. He took the broken pieces to the attic, where he disposed of them along with the remaining ammunition. The police, already alerted by Brenda's 911 call, quickly arrived at the scene. They found Robert lying on the floor with bullet wounds in his torso and near his neck. At 43 years old, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Their two children, who had remained safely in their upstairs rooms, were later taken to their grandparents. Brenda, with her arm stained red and fighting against the pain, repeated the same story to the officers that she had told the 911 operator before being taken to the nearest hospital. However, as the investigation began, it became clear that nothing was missing from the house, nor were there any clues pointing to masked gunmen. The first challenge for the investigators was the lack of a clear motive for the crime. At dawn on Wednesday, November 21st, believing the coast was clear, James left his hiding spot and went straight to return the car to his daughter. He barely spoke to her and quickly said goodbye. However, she was shocked to find that her father left a bullet on the car's floor. As the investigation continued without any major breakthroughs, the neighbors returned from their vacation. They thought they had narrowly escaped the nightmare that their neighbors had endured. However, soon after, a discovery put them on high alert. A bullet found in their home, a new piece of evidence, was immediately sent to the forensic lab. The specialist in charge determined without a doubt that it was identical to the one found in Robert's garage. With the neighbors' permission to search their entire home, the officers found several bullets of the same caliber in the attic matching the second gun used in the crime. Since there was no sign of forced entry, the investigators were left with two possibilities. Either the intruder was a professional or it was someone who had a key to the house. With no solid leads, the investigators posed a crucial question: who stood to benefit from Robert's death? As they spoke with those close to him, someone suggested that Brenda was the primary beneficiary of such a tragedy. From there, the authorities learned of the troubles in the couple's relationship and began asking more pointed questions of the family. Meanwhile, James was determined to escape unscathed. He researched Argentina online, having heard that the country had no extradition agreement with the United States. He even asked his daughter to help him create a document with Robert's forged signature, granting permission for him and Brenda to take the children out of the country. His final instruction to her was to transfer funds from his account to hers, so that when he and Brenda left, she could send them money without the transactions being traced back to her account. As the investigation progressed, the police sought the expertise of a handwriting analyst who was tasked with determining the authenticity of Robert's supposed signature on the insurance policy. After hours of detailed analysis and comparisons, he was certain that the signature was forged, although he had no way of identifying who was behind the falsification. The situation took a darker turn on November 25, 2001. That day, James borrowed his ex-wife's car and used it to disappear from Oklahoma with Brenda and her two children. As the couple fled toward Mexico, the next day, Thursday, November 26, 2001, Robert's loved ones were shocked to discover that Brenda had not even attended the funeral service to honor her husband's memory. She had also prevented her children from saying a final goodbye to their father. At that point, investigators had more than enough reasons to consider the couple as the prime suspects in the murder, and their efforts focused on uncovering the truth. However, the fugitives had a significant head start as they were already on Mexican soil. From there, James repeatedly contacted his daughter, asking her to send them money. In the weeks that followed, the investigation progressed slowly but steadily. The authorities eventually found the receipt for a firearm purchase in James's name and later confirmed that he had been the one who forged Robert's signature on the insurance policy. With these discoveries, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Forensic investigations, including ballistics and bloodstain analysis, helped complete the picture of a story driven by jealousy, betrayal, and greed. With a clearer understanding of the situation, law enforcement launched a coordinated operation with various agencies to track down the fugitive suspects. A crucial ally in this effort turned out to be James's daughter, who, after being approached by the police, cooperated with the FBI. Thanks to the detailed information she provided on February 28, 2002, after 3 months on the run, James and Brenda were arrested. Brenda immediately called Rick, her former lover, asking him to help her contact her attorney, claiming she had important legal documents in the children's luggage. One of these documents was a written confession in the form of a letter addressed to her daughter, which prosecutors later stated was actually authored by James, whose handwriting had become familiar to them through the numerous analyses conducted during the investigation. Both James and Brenda were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. A month later, they were extradited to Oklahoma City, where they were to be tried separately. While in pre-trial detention, Brenda became acquainted with Teresa Sullivan, a federal inmate. Whether it was a slip of the tongue or pride in her actions is unclear, but Brenda confessed to Teresa in great detail everything that had happened on that fateful night in November. Around the same time, a legal battle ensued over the custody of Brenda and Robert's children. A judge initially placed them in the care of their paternal grandparents, but Brenda was unhappy with this arrangement. She wanted them to live with her sister, claiming that she didn't trust her in-laws and feared they would prevent the children from visiting her in prison. A neutral attorney appointed solely to represent the children's interests reported that the kids exhibited unusual behavior after visiting their mother in jail. As a result, the attorney recommended against further visits. The judge overseeing the case spent an entire day listening to witnesses and lawyers. The judge then announced his decision that the kids would remain with the Andrews family. He noted that the longer the children stayed in that home, the more they seemed to thrive. The case against James and Brenda involved months of waiting, including witness selection, jury deliberations, evidence gathering, and other necessary steps. Finally, on August 25, 2003, James went to trial. After all the evidence and testimonies were presented, implicating him as the planner and one of the perpetrators of the crime, he was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder a month later. As a result, in October of that same year, James was sentenced to death. Brenda's trial took place in 2004, and during the grueling sessions, 2 specific testimonies caused a significant stir, both for the defendant and the public. The individuals who took the stand were none other than Rick and James, her former lovers, who both described her as a seductive and manipulative woman. But just when it seemed the trial had exhausted all possibilities for controversy or shock, the prosecutor, during his closing argument, presented a piece of Brenda's lingerie to the jury, arguing that the item was compelling evidence that the supposedly grieving widow had packed it to flee with her lover. According to a local newspaper, the spectacle caused gasps in the packed courtroom. On September 22, 2004, after 6 weeks of trial, Brenda was found guilty of all charges against her. The Oklahoma County jury also voted in favor of the death penalty. The following day, during her sentencing hearing, Brenda arrived with a defiant attitude, looking directly at the judge and condemning both the verdict and the sentence as egregious judicial errors. She vowed to fight until her name was cleared. Finally, as stipulated, the judge sentenced Brenda to death for the murder of her husband, Robert Andrew. Both Brenda and her former lover were placed on death row in Oklahoma, with Brenda being the only woman in that position in the entire state. But as she had predicted, she focused on efforts to overturn what she considered an injustice. However, Brenda's first major setback came on June 21, 2007, when the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals denied her appeal by a vote of 4-1. The following year, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected her appeal as well. On February 26, 2024, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights issued a resolution granting precautionary measures in favor of Brenda, considering her to be in a situation of serious and urgent risk of irreparable harm to her rights. After 18 years on death row, the commission argued that Brenda faced imminent execution, likely in 2024, which would violate several provisions of the American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Man. These included the right to due process, equality before the law, a fair trial, and adequate defense. The petitioners specifically claimed that her trial was laden with gender stereotypes and a discriminatory narrative. For its part, the state informed the petitioners that it had forwarded the request for precautionary measures to the Oklahoma Attorney General and reiterated its position that the commission lacks the authority to require states to adopt such measures. As for James, he exhausted his appeals in the case and is now the 26th inmate eligible for an execution date once Oklahoma resumes carrying out such sentences. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
Day after day, we are surrounded by the presence of criminals. We are spectators to the deepest darkness in human actions and the bizarre reality that someone's suffering can be a form of pleasure. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Luke, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The case of Marianne Bachmeier. Marianne Bachmeier was born on June 3, 1950, in Sarstedt, West Germany. Her family ended up there following the public persecution and scrutiny her father faced for being a former official of the German National Socialist Party. During World War II, he was a member of the notorious SS. As a result, Marianne was raised in a very conservative home by deeply religious tutors. It's said that she never had a happy childhood due to a lack of close relationship with her parents. Her father was authoritarian, abusive, and an alcoholic, often spending more time at a bar near their home than with his family. Marianne's mother was also distant, rarely speaking or spending time with her daughter. The situation worsened due to her father's drinking, which increased his aggression towards the family. This ended with the parents' divorce and the father leaving the house. Marianne thought she could finally be free and happy, but soon her mother remarried another abusive man. Unfortunately, instead of Marianne and her mother uniting against the man, they both turned against Marianne, blaming her for the family's problems. This broke their relationship, and Marianne, seen as a troublesome teenager, was eventually kicked out of the house. During her adolescence, Marianne faced multiple assaults from different men, leading to the birth of her first child at just 16. She was forced to give the baby up for adoption due to lack of resources and because the baby's father abandoned her. 2 years later, Marianne got pregnant again by her then abusive boyfriend. Despite the circumstances, she wanted to keep the baby, but before the child's birth, she experienced another traumatic assault at a nightclub. Her boyfriend left her, and she gave up this second child for adoption as well. Later, Marianne dropped out of school and sought work to support herself. She started working at a bar named Tipasa, where she met the manager, and after some time, they became a couple. At 22, she became pregnant with her third child and felt ready to raise the baby with some resources and a home. However, her then boyfriend disagreed with her decision, ending their relationship. Marianne, firm in her choice, decided to raise her daughter Anna alone, despite her parents' demands to give her up for adoption like her previous children. After Anna's birth, Marianne vowed to be a good mother and underwent a tubal ligation, a common practice at the time to prevent overpopulation. Marianne and Anna lived together in Lübeck, Germany, and despite challenges, they made it through. Indeed, Marianne was happy because her daughter was the only person in her life who did not intend to harm her, unlike her parents or ex-partners. However, raising Anna alone meant Marianne had to take her to work at the bar, so she could only attend to her daughter during her few breaks. Years later, people close to Marianne would say that she treated Anna like a little adult and expected her to take care of many things on her own from a young age. Anna often slept in the bar while Marianne was working, and a friend described Anna as a very vibrant and creative child who unfortunately never had a pleasant family life, as she only occasionally saw her father at the bar. Some stories also mention that Marianne worked late into the night and then slept all day, leaving her 7-year-old daughter alone for much of the day. Anna used this time to play around the neighborhood alone, greeting people and playing with their pets. It was even mentioned that Marianne was aware of her problematic lifestyle and sometimes contemplated the idea of giving Anna up for adoption. This leads us to May 5, 1980, where it is unclear exactly what happened that morning between Anna and Marianne. Some say they argued because Anna woke up in a bad mood and stubbornly did not want to go to school but wanted to play in the park, which Marianne did not allow. There's another version where Anna asked permission from her mother to skip school to play in the park with friends, and Marianne eventually let her go, not suspecting her daughter's real intentions to play elsewhere. Regardless, Anna was playing outside when the ensuing events turned into a tragedy in Marianne's life. When Marianne returned home later that day, she found it strange not to find her daughter anywhere but decided to wait a few more hours for her return. As time passed and Anna did not return, Marianne started searching the neighborhood. She asked Anna's friends and locals if they knew anything about her daughter, but nobody knew anything. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. So Marianne reported this anomaly to the police. The next day, a very upset and nervous woman arrived at the police. It seemed that this man, Klaus Grabowski, 35 years old, was overcome with guilt after the act and couldn't find peace. He ended up confessing in detail what happened to his girlfriend. This caused a great argument, after which he left. confused, to go to a bar for a beer. His girlfriend took this opportunity to go to the police station to report him. The truth was that Anna had been abducted by Klaus, who owned a butcher shop near Marianne's house. Anna had gone there intending to play because the man had promised her that she could play with his cats whenever she wanted to visit. Innocently, Anna went and rang the doorbell. Klaus received her and kept her in his house for several hours, assaulting her multiple times until finally, to prevent the child from confessing the facts, he ended her life by suffocation with a pair of his girlfriend's stockings. Klaus Grabowski had a history of criminal activities and had previously been convicted for the assault of 2 young girls. He was known to have a troubled past. In 1973, he attacked a 6-year-old girl and was charged with attempted murder. 2 years later, he faced charges for these crimes, leading to a psychological evaluation. The results indicated he had an abnormal sexual instinct and significantly limited capacity to control it. Consequently, he was sent to a psychological treatment center instead of prison. A few years later, Klaus was offered the option of undergoing a controversial chemical castration procedure in exchange for early release, which he readily accepted. This procedure involved administering drugs to reduce libido and testosterone levels, reducing the likelihood of reoffending. Klaus preferred this option over returning to a mental health facility. It was a common practice for offenders of such crimes, often resulting in reduced sentences under the assumption that they no longer posed a societal threat. Despite the reversibility of this procedure, Klaus was released soon after undergoing it, without subsequent psychological evaluations. 2 years later, he underwent hormonal treatment to reverse the chemical castration, increasing his testosterone levels. This treatment was approved by the court under the pretext that he wanted to start a family with his girlfriend and lead a normal life, thus misleading everyone about his true nature. On the day of the incident, authorities quickly headed to Klaus's residence, but couldn't find him. He had taken Anna's body and left a note for his girlfriend, asking her to meet him at a bar that night to discuss the situation. The police took this opportunity to wait for Klaus at the bar and arrested him upon his arrival. After his arrest, Klaus claimed he had no intention of inappropriately touching Anna. He despicably defended himself by alleging that the child tried to seduce and extort him, and fear of returning to jail drove him to end her life. He claimed Anna had threatened to tell her mother he had inappropriately touched her, a claim he insisted was false and made with the intent to extort money from him. Klaus revealed he had hidden the body in a cardboard box near a canal. When the police informed Marianne about her daughter's whereabouts and tragic demise, she was devastated. However, the trial brought further anguish. Marianne was forced to hear testimonies and descriptions about her life and Anna's, suggesting that Anna was practically raised on the streets and that such an incident was inevitable due to Marianne's negligence as a bar waitress who worked late nights and neglected her daughter. This left Marianne heartbroken and furious, particularly tormented by the possibility that Anna's killer might not receive the maximum penalty due to potential claims of mental health issues, which could allow him to avoid prison. Consequently, Marianne silently began to devise a plan to avenge her daughter's death, regardless of the consequences. During the trial, Klaus Grabowski repeatedly claimed that Anna had seduced and extorted him for money, insisting that his actions were driven by the fear of returning to jail. His defense also centered around the idea that the hormonal treatment he was undergoing significantly affected him and led to violent outbursts. Frustrated and injured by these lies, Marianne decided to buy a gun and secretly practice shooting. Every time Marianne attended the trial, her displeasure was evident, especially when she heard statements that defamed her 7-year-old daughter. At one point, she expressed clear anger, unable to bear listening to Klaus and his lawyer's fabrications. However, the trial took a dramatic turn on its third day, March 6, 1981. Marianne arrived at the courtroom later than usual, entering with an expressionless face. She walked with an upright posture, her hands in the pockets of her white coat. Unbeknownst to others, she had managed to bypass the strict security measures of the judicial establishment with a pistol in her pocket. As the judge and others in the courtroom carried on with the proceedings, Klaus, with his back to Marianne, faced the judge. At this moment, Marianne stood still, her nerves palpable. She seized the opportunity to act when Klaus stood up to give his statement. Marianne pulled out the pistol and fired 7 shots, 6 of which struck Klaus, causing him to collapse. The precision of her shots was noted by many. Marianne remained expressionless throughout, slightly moving her lips as she fired. She made no attempt to flee and did not resist when the courtroom security detained her. Marianne was heard saying, "That pig killed my daughter. He shot her in the face, but I shot him in the back. I hope he's dead." Her wish was confirmed when an officer checked Klaus and declared him dead. Upon hearing this, a look of relief crossed Marianne's face, contrasting her previous expressions. However, Marianne now faced her own trial, which would not be easy to escape. Those who witnessed the incident noted that Marianne seemed to be in a trance, struggling to comprehend her actions. The forensic psychiatrist examined her, asking her to write something to analyze her handwriting and mental state. Marianne wrote, "I did it for Anna," surrounding the sentence with 7 hearts, possibly representing each year of Anna's life. The next day, German newspapers displayed Marianne's photo, dubbing her the Avenging Mother. The case became the most well-known instance of vigilante justice in West Germany, garnering extensive media coverage. Television crews from across Europe rushed to report on the case, highlighting its extraordinary and tragic nature. Marianne was quickly brought to trial for murder. During her trial, she testified that she was not fully aware of her actions, claiming she was in a trance and even had a dream where she saw Anna walking through the courtrooms. She also mentioned her mental health had deteriorated significantly following the events. Marianne then told a lie that likely worsened her standing with the judge. She claimed she had bought the gun to end her own life, but no one believed she hadn't premeditated her actions and practiced with the weapon before using it in court. Many people in Germany and around the world supported Marianne for taking matters into her own hands, as they felt the system had failed by previously freeing Klaus and authorizing his hormonal treatment without proper evaluation. They saw it as fair to set her free. However, there were also those who viewed Marianne as a criminal who had taken justice into her own hands in the worst possible way, labeling her a murderer. Others judged her for being an irresponsible mother who had given up her other 2 children for adoption and committed a cold-blooded crime that could have harmed others in the process. With all this controversy and mixed feelings, Marianne was charged with murder in a judicial process for the death of Klaus Grabowski on November 2, 1982. The prosecution later withdrew the charge, and after 28 days of negotiations, the jury reached a verdict. In March 1983, Marianne was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and illegal possession of a firearm, sentenced to 6 years in prison. 3 years later, the authorities reconsidered, believing she didn't deserve any sentence. Soon after, Marianne sold her life story for about 250,000 German marks in an exclusive to a news magazine, stating she did it to pay off the debts caused by the judicial process. Following the fall of the Berlin Wall, she returned to a now unified Germany after being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. During this time, Marianne was interviewed by various media outlets, often placed in tense situations with questions comparing her to Klaus, as both were murderers. Despite this, she maintained her composure, stating she did what she did to ensure Klaus faced justice for his actions against the 7-year-old girl, even as he continued to spread lies about her in his final moments. Knowing her illness was terminal, Marianne asked a reporter to accompany her with a movie camera until her last moments. Mary Ann passed away at the age of 46 on September 17, 1996, from pancreatic cancer. She was buried next to her daughter Anna's grave in the Lubeck Cemetery. And that's the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon. The horrible case of Oakley Carlson. Oakley Carlson's journey began on December 6, 2016, in Oakville, Washington, but her upbringing was far from ordinary. She came from a family facing numerous challenges. Her parents, Jordan Bowers and Andrew Carson, had their fair share of troubles. Andrew had a brief stint as a police officer, but got dismissed due to misconduct, although it didn't lead to any criminal charges. On the other hand, Jordan had a history marked by serious drug and theft-related offenses, and both grappled with substance abuse. Their family had been under scrutiny since 2013 due to various complaints about how they were raising their children. In August 2017, Jordan initiated a crowdfunding campaign in a bid to gather support for hiring a lawyer. Child Protective Services had taken custody of their children following a report that they weren't providing proper medical care to one of their daughters, who had health issues affecting her growth and weight. During that same period, 8-month-old Oakley found herself in the care of Eric and Jamie Jo Hiles. The Hiles were caring school teachers who had a deep longing to become parents. Their journey to become Oakley's foster parents began when a former student of theirs informed them that the granddaughter of his hairdresser needed a foster home and would eventually be put up for adoption. He suggested that they offer a loving home, and they wholeheartedly agreed. As Oakley grew, she blossomed into a joyful child who loved to bring smiles to everyone around her. Her passion for dancing led to her enrollment in dance classes. She also possessed an extraordinary ability to memorize stories and was exceptionally bright, radiating love in the Hiles home. Jamie and Eric were always honest with Oakley, explaining that although she didn't come from Jamie's belly, she came from her heart. The couple cherished her deeply and had dreams of adopting her. However, in October 2019, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families made the difficult decision that Oakley should return to live with her biological family. Despite the Hiles' concerns, in November 2019, just a week shy of her 3rd birthday, Oakley bid farewell to Jamie and Eric, returning to live with Jordan, Andrew, and her siblings. Jamie later shared in an interview the heart-wrenching experience of letting go of Oakley on the day before Thanksgiving dinner. It was a tearful farewell, filled with uncertainty about whether they'd ever have the chance to see her again. They remained vigilant about Oakley's well-being, as they had lingering concerns about Jordan and Andrew's ability to care for and protect her. Regrettably, the concerns of Oakley's foster parents were not unfounded. In 2020, Oakley spent Christmas with her paternal grandparents, who were deeply alarmed by her condition. She had developed noticeable dark circles under her eyes, had sores on her face, and appeared pale and bruised. Worried for her safety and well-being, the grandparents reached out to Child Protective Services, but it seemed that their report only ignited a significant family dispute. Following that disturbing incident, Andrew's parents had no further contact with Oakley or her parents. Nearly a year later, on November 6, 2021, just before 5 p.m., Andrew contacted the authorities to report a house fire that had occurred earlier that same day. According to his account, Oakley accidentally set the sofa on fire while playing with a lighter. Andrew explained that he and his wife had battled the flames for 4 hours, but despite their best efforts, the fire had spread to the 2nd floor of their home. This raised eyebrows among the firefighters, primarily due to the considerable delay between the start of the fire and its reporting. Andrew attributed the delay to the chaotic situation, as neither he nor his wife could locate their cell phones to call for assistance. Given the inconsistencies in the information provided, officials launched a thorough investigation into the incident. Their findings revealed that the fire had actually originated in the microwave, contradicting the initial report of the sofa being the source of the blaze. In the aftermath of the fire, a close family friend organized an online fundraiser, explaining that the fire had devastated the upper part of their house, resulting in the loss of most of their belongings. Several days later, Jessica, the local school director, whose daughter was friends with one of the Carlson girls, decided to visit the family. They were staying at an inn at the time, and she aimed to deliver supplies and offer support. Upon her arrival, she immediately noticed Oakley's absence and inquired about her whereabouts. She was informed that Oakley was grounded. Subsequently, she sent a school colleague to make another supply delivery, but this visit lasted only 5 minutes. The colleague became increasingly concerned that Oakley was not present with her siblings on that day. Growing ever more alarmed about the perplexing absence of the child, Jessica seized an opportunity during a visit from Oakley's younger sister, who was spending the night at her place, to gently inquire about Oakley's whereabouts. To her shock, the 6-year-old girl responded with visible irritation, stating that Oakley no longer existed and had been taken in by her adoptive parents. This startling revelation prompted Jessica to take immediate action. She promptly contacted the County Child Protective Services office, expressing her deep concern about Oakley's safety and requesting a welfare check to ensure the child's well-being. On December 6, 2021, authorities conducted a visit to the hotel where Oakley's family had been staying after the fire, with the aim of assessing the situation regarding the missing child. Jordan greeted them at the door, holding a 2-year-old child in her arms, and indicated that the family was in the process of packing up. The ensuing conversation was fraught with unsettling signs. When questioned about Oakley's whereabouts, Jordan responded that Oakley was with her foster mother. The officer pressed her to confirm if she was indeed the child's mother, to which she affirmed. However, when asked again about her daughter's location, Jordan's response was to turn around and seek confirmation from someone else in the room if the child was with her foster parents. At this juncture, the officer beckoned Andrew closer to the entrance and posed the same question about his daughter's whereabouts. He replied that Oakley was with his parents, referring to the child's grandparents, but admitted he did not have their address or phone number. Eventually, he provided this crucial information to the police. According to official records, the officers reached out to Andrew's father, who disclosed that they had not seen their granddaughter since December 2020 when she had spent Christmas with them. Subsequently, authorities visited the grandparents' residence in person, confirming that the child was indeed not with them. Realizing their investigative options narrowing, they contacted social services personnel to inquire if the child was in foster care. However, according to the officials, the child should have been with her biological parents. Upon returning to the Carlsons' hotel room, the officials informed Andrew that the child was not with her grandparents. Rather than displaying concern, he appeared oddly indifferent, as if he had prior knowledge of the information they had just conveyed. Jordan's reaction, while different, was equally perplexing. She erupted in anger, tightly clenched her fists, and declared her refusal to answer their questions before promptly retreating to the room. For the authorities, it was becoming increasingly apparent that the Carlsons were harboring something. Adding to their concerns was a peculiar observation made regarding the family's vehicle parked at the hotel. There was only one child safety seat, despite the fact that they were supposed to have 4 children, all under the age of 10. On the same day, around 2:00 p.m., Jessica, the school director, contacted the police to report an unusual incident. Jordan had called the school during regular school hours, citing an emergency and expressing the need to pick up her 6-year-old daughter. Acting on the cautionary side, the authorities promptly instructed the school not to release the child to her parents. However, the warning turned out to be unnecessary, as Jordan and Andrew failed to show up at the school. Approximately an hour and a half after the call, 32-year-old Jordan and 36-year-old Andrew departed the hotel with their 2-year-old child, but their departure did not go unnoticed. Both of them were arrested for obstruction as they adamantly refused to cooperate with the ongoing investigation. Simultaneously, on the same day, the police made a public appeal on social media, seeking assistance from the community to help locate Oakley. According to a report from a local newspaper, this marked a turning point as Child Protective Services assumed custody of the 2- and 6-year-old children. As for the 9-year-old, the identity of the guardian who assumed custody remained undisclosed. The family's residence and property underwent a thorough examination, with detectives from the county police and the FBI working together. Despite their meticulous search of the house, they found no sign of the missing girl or any evidence suggesting she had been living there recently. What stood out was that while all her siblings had designated bedrooms, there was no indication of a room for Oakley, and her clothing and toys were noticeably absent. A significant discovery for the ongoing investigation was the presence of bloodstains on the blinds, the front door, and a handprint on one of the walls. On December 6, Andrew and Jordan found themselves in the county jail, each with a bond set at $150,000 and a 72-hour hold, all due to suspicions of involuntary manslaughter. However, as the investigations progressed, additional charges were brought against them in the following days. They now faced allegations of second-degree abandonment of a dependent person. This new charge stemmed from the authorities' discovery that, for approximately 15 months, the couple had failed to provide their 6-year-old daughter with the prescribed medical treatment, resulting in a severe decline in her health that posed a risk of death. The police clarified that this was the sole charge that would keep them detained, and the bond remained in effect. Oakley's paternal grandparents issued a statement, emphasizing their full cooperation with the investigation and their singular objective: to locate their missing granddaughter. They also shared their prayers for the child's safe return and expressed gratitude for all those diligently working to find her. On December 13 of the same year, the search efforts officially concluded. Law enforcement authorities reported extensive searches that covered over 300 acres, scouring for any trace of the vanished child. The police affirmed that every inch of land had been meticulously examined, leaving no stone unturned. However, he underlined that the quest for truth regarding the fate of the little girl was far from over. Despite the parents' claims of having seen the child as recently as November 30, they were unable to provide any concrete information about her whereabouts or her current condition. Their inability to confirm whether the child was under the care of an adult further compounded the mystery. Yet, considering all the gathered evidence, detectives established a troubling timeline. Oakley had not been seen alive since January 27, 2021. It led them to a grim conclusion that the child couldn't possibly have survived on her own for such an extended period. Given these revelations, authorities issued a heartfelt plea to anyone who may have come into contact with Oakley since January 2021 or had interactions with her parents during that time to step forward with any information they might possess. Furthermore, court documents unveiled disturbing testimonies from Oakley's own siblings, who held the grim belief that their sister was no longer among the living. The eldest among them disclosed that their mother had strictly forbidden any discussion about Oakley. They recounted a tragic narrative in which Oakley had supposedly accidentally started a house fire using their mother's lighter, leading to physical abuse and her confinement in a cell beneath the stairs as a form of punishment. Their mother had allegedly told them that Oakley had ventured into the woods and met a tragic fate at the jaws of wolves. Another sibling recalled incidents where Jordan had used a belt to discipline Oakley and had locked her in a closet, expressing deep concerns about their sister's well-being and a haunting fear that she might have succumbed to starvation. Based on the available information, authorities were unable to determine whether Oakley was still alive before the house fire. It's worth noting that legal documents revealed a troubling history. Since 2013, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families had received a total of 11 records related to the Carlsons. Among these, 8 were closely examined in light of allegations involving domestic violence, physical abuse, parental drug use, and medical neglect. In February 2022, a significant development unfolded in the case against Jordan and Andrew. This time, they faced fresh charges for endangering their children by exposing them to a controlled substance. This shocking turn of events stemmed from the alarming discovery of dangerously high levels of methamphetamine in the bodies of 2 of their children. A month later, on March 14, it was reported in the media that Andrew had pleaded guilty to separate charges of endangering 2 of his children with drugs. Unfortunately, his guilty plea did not yield any information that could shed light on the circumstances surrounding Oakley's disappearance. It was also announced at that time that Andrew would face sentencing at the end of March, with the maximum penalty being 12 months of imprisonment. In response to these developments, concerned citizens gathered near County Jail, demanding that the Carlsons reveal the fate of their daughter. The protesters raised their voices, labeling Jordan as a monster rather than a mother. Among the demonstrators stood Oakley's foster mother, who expressed her dissatisfaction with the potential 1-year sentence for the biological father, emphasizing that the children's trauma would extend far beyond that period. As planned, Andrew's sentencing hearing unfolded on March 28, conducted through a video call. The judge delivered a 12-month sentence for endangering the minors. While pronouncing the verdict, the judge directed her words toward the defendant, highlighting the fundamental duty of a parent to protect their children, a duty he had evidently failed to fulfill. Moreover, the judge imposed several restrictions on Andrew. These restrictions included a prohibition on consuming controlled substances. Additionally, he was mandated to undergo a chemical dependency assessment within 45 days of his release, follow a recommended treatment, and provide proof of compliance to the court for the subsequent 6 months following his release from prison. In early April 2022, shortly after Andrew's sentencing, Jordan also entered a guilty plea. She admitted guilt on the 2 charges of exposing her children to contact with a controlled substance. Consequently, on April 22, she received a 20-month prison sentence. Moreover, she was subject to a restriction that prevented her from having any contact with minors under the age of 18 without proper supervision. However, in January 2023, shortly after her release following her sentence related to 2 of her children, Jordan faced legal issues once again. This time, she was arrested for fraud and identity theft. Authorities revealed that she had fraudulently acquired 4 credit cards using personal information from friends and family. Interestingly, 3 of these illicitly obtained cards were discovered obstructing a toilet in the hotel room where the couple had stayed following their house fire. It was also disclosed that Jordan had spent over $40,000 using these cards, making purchases at Walmart and eBay, and even withdrawing cash for gambling at a casino. Jordan eventually reached a guilty plea agreement. Initially facing a 36-month sentence, the judge, exercising discretion, decided to impose a longer sentence. Consequently, Jordan was sentenced to 43 months in jail. Meanwhile, Oakley's foster parents have remained actively engaged in their relentless search for the missing child. They have continued to express their frustration and heartache, maintaining that the decision to return the girl to her biological parents was made hastily and put the child's well-being at risk, given that Andrew and Jordan were deemed unfit, both mentally and physically, to care for her. Oakley's disappearance had a profound impact on the public, evoking significant interest and empathy. The local community not only cooperated with law enforcement, but also assembled in front of the county courthouse on multiple occasions, demanding justice. Additionally, an online petition was launched in December 2021, amassing over 7,000 signatures. The petition sought to advocate for a support system aimed at safeguarding children who were returning to their families after exiting the foster care system. It also called for mandatory long-term drug testing for families reuniting with their children. This petition eventually evolved into a bill known as the Oakley Law. While it was reported in February 2023 that the bill had encountered obstacles in the Washington state legislature, it did prompt responses from representatives of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families in the state. These officials agreed to engage in discussions regarding policy and budget options, indicating the continued effort to address critical child welfare issues. The fate of Oakley remains shrouded in mystery, presenting a perplexing puzzle for investigators. Their most plausible scenario suggests that the young girl may have tragically lost her life. However, since her disappearance, an unsettling hypothesis has emerged that Jordan might have sold her. The investigation has grappled with an inundation of leads, which has proven to be one of its most challenging aspects from the very outset. The county police has been inundated with reports from all over the country, each suggesting potential sightings of the missing girl. They've diligently collaborated with law enforcement agencies across the United States, meticulously examining every lead. Regrettably, none of these leads has yielded any information about Oakley's whereabouts. Another formidable hurdle faced by investigators was the absence of a clear timeline pinpointing when the girl disappeared. To construct a timeline, they had to painstakingly piece together who had interacted with Jordan, Andrew, and Oakley in the months leading up to her disappearance. This endeavor involved tracking down family members, school personnel, and scoring surveillance footage from various stores. The investigators acknowledged that it would have been relatively straightforward if they were dealing with a family or a group of people who adhered to a consistent, predictable routine. However, in this case, the family's movements were marked by unpredictability. As of the conclusion of this investigation, Oakley's parents had not provided any information concerning the child's fate, and both continued to be regarded as suspects in her disappearance. The investigations remains active and ongoing. In their relentless quest for clues, the police has extended an $85,000 reward. And that's the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon. Day after day, we are surrounded by the presence of criminals. We are spectators to the deepest darkness in human actions and the bizarre reality that someone's suffering can be a form of pleasure. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Luke, and today I bring you another Unreal True Crime. The Juan Fernando Hermosa case. Juan Fernando Hermosa Suarez came into the world on February 28, 1976, amidst the picturesque province of Sucumbíos in Ecuador. His early life was shrouded in mystery, with no concrete information about his biological father and his mother, a humble laundry worker, struggling to provide for him. Consequently, when Juan was just a year old, destiny intervened, leading to his adoption by Rafael Hermosa and Zoila Suarez, a compassionate couple longing for children. They resided in a small and tranquil city in Ecuador until 1982, when a significant change transpired. Rafael sold their farm, and the family relocated to Quito, the vibrant capital of Ecuador. Initially, Juan's life appeared to follow a typical trajectory. He experienced the ups and downs of childhood, marked by occasional erratic moods. However, a pivotal moment occurred when he was around 7 years old. A young girl named Gloria entered the Hermosa family's life, altering its course. Gloria, at the tender age of 14, unveiled a startling revelation. She was Juan's sister. Gloria sought refuge with the Hermosa family, as her stepfather had cast her aside. Rafael and Zoila, known for their compassion, welcomed Gloria into their home. As time passed, Gloria found herself alone with Juan and chose to share a life-altering secret. Juan was adopted. This revelation, delivered without much consideration for his age and emotional readiness, left Juan grappling with profound questions. Gloria's presence also brought strife into the household, as she frequently disparaged Rafael and Zoila to Juan. Her tales included speculations about theft and flight from their home. Gloria's turbulent and disruptive behavior made it difficult for her to coexist with the Hermosa family, and she soon moved on. Juan's response to this revelation was tumultuous. As he mustered the courage to confront his adoptive parents, tears welled up in his eyes. He posed the painful question of whether it was true that Rafael and Zoila were not his biological parents. Faced with the heart-wrenching truth, they had no choice but to share the details of Juan's adoption. Some people have the notion that criminal behavior can be attributed solely to the influence of one's upbringing. In this case, Juan's adoptive parents, though imperfect, made sincere efforts to guide him down the right path. Nevertheless, it became increasingly evident that Juan's trajectory was far from conventional. Juan's journey took a tumultuous turn as he spiraled into rebellion. Crossing the boundary of typical childhood behavior at the tender age of 9. It was during these formative years that he began a disturbing pattern of animal cruelty, primarily targeting cats. He would macabrely bring their lifeless remains to school, seeking to shock and garner attention. Unsurprisingly, these actions resulted in multiple expulsions from school. In an attempt to curb his unruly behavior, Rafael, his adoptive father, resorted to occasional corporal punishment. Yet his discipline never escalated to a level that could be deemed excessive. In fact, it was evident that Juan did not hold any lingering grudges against Rafael or Zoila, his adoptive mother. Rafael's work commitments frequently led him to travel, leaving Juan with more unsupervised time. Although Zoila provided some company, her hearing impairment and struggles with arthritis prevented her from being a constant presence. Consequently, Juan found himself increasingly isolated. Completing elementary school at the age of 12 was a significant accomplishment for Juan, given his penchant for petty theft. He had already embarked on a path of pilfering, selling whatever items he could lay his hands on. Remarkably, his criminal endeavors thus far had entailed relatively low levels of risk. However, at the age of 13, Juan became embroiled in a reckless car theft escapade alongside older boys. Assuming the role of a passenger, they initially evaded capture. Their audacious greed, however, led them to steal yet another vehicle, resulting in their apprehension. Juan's subsequent placement in a juvenile correctional facility underscored the urgent need for reform within these institutions. In the majority of cases, these facilities only serve to further entrench delinquent behavior, treating these young individuals as hardened criminals. The meager mental assistance provided took the form of disconnected lectures, falling short of addressing their unique needs. Ultimately, these facilities inadvertently fostered camaraderie among these youths, often amplifying the influence of the already deeply troubled. Contrary to expectations, Juan found himself targeted within the correctional facility, not due to his physical stature or menacing appearance, but as a victim of severe bullying. Physical assaults and harsh verbal taunts became a daily ordeal. Amid this grim backdrop, a fellow inmate named Luis Anibal, merely 2 months older than Juan, entered the scene. Sharing a background of financial hardship, Lewis's mother worked as a cleaner, but he had not been placed for adoption. Lewis's circumstances were even more dire, with an abusive stepfather, mistreatment of his mother, and his sister subjected to similar horrors. Lewis Unable found himself on a perilous path marked by thefts and altercations, eventually leading him to the correctional facility. His presence there was not the consequence of a specific crime, but rather a desperate measure enacted by his mother, who hoped to redirect him onto the right track, only to inadvertently exacerbate his situation. Extended stays in the correctional facility, combined with shared experiences and a profound sense of disconnection from mainstream society, brought together these young men who struggled to forge connections elsewhere. In a bold endeavor, they even hired a taxi driver on an hourly basis to impart driving lessons. In no time, they became proficient behind the wheel of a car, coincidentally a taxi. The prospect of learning to drive infused these young men with excitement, for it heralded the initiation of their car theft endeavors. Their maiden foray into auto theft involved a Hyundai Accent, a venture that left no casualties, except for one, and Unable themselves, who, presumably due to nerves, met with a road mishap. Providentially, their escapade went unnoticed, and they managed to elude capture. Their subsequent car theft also ended in an encounter with law enforcement. However, they had meticulously prepared for such an eventuality, carrying counterfeit credentials purporting them to be the offspring of officers stationed in Quito. It goes without saying that these claims were entirely fabricated, unbeknownst to the genuine officers. Fortuitously for the boys, they were intercepted by a sergeant and a corporal who were unacquainted with the officers they impersonated, hence readily accepting the spurious credentials. Inquisitive officers questioned the boys about the car, intuitively discerning that it was unusual for the child of an officer to possess such a vehicle. Displaying remarkable cunning, the boys explained that it was a stolen car their father had managed to recover. The officers, harboring suspicions, suggested changing the vehicle's tires. It's important to note that some may not be familiar with the prevalent practice in Latin America, where police recover stolen cars, strip them of valuable parts for resale, and subsequently lay blame on the thieves for causing damage to the vehicle. The boys consented, offering to replace any components with lower quality substitutes in exchange for monetary compensation. The officers agreed, and an arrangement that left all parties content ensued. This modus operandi persisted for a while, initially yielding limited results. While leaving a disco with friends on November 22, 1991, the Juan and his group took a taxi. Hermosa pulled out a pistol obtained through a guard, shooting the driver in the head and killing him instantly. One of his friends then drove the vehicle to the southeast of the city and disposed of the body in the Los Chios Valley, where the body was found by police the next day. A week later, Hermosa went with other members of his gang to a hairdresser where he usually fixed his hair, operated by a transgender named Charlie. Charlie invited them to drink at home, where they started an argument which ended in Hermosa shooting Charlie 5 times before he could ask for help. Hermosa's crimes totaled 22 murders, occurring in only 4 months, claiming the lives of 8 taxi drivers, 11 homosexuals, a truck driver and his acquaintance, as well as 2 others, earning him the nickname the Kid of Terror. The victims were shot to death with a pistol, the crimes occurring during the weekends, which caused a panic among the taxi drivers and homosexuals who lived in northern Quito. One fateful morning, patrolling officers were alerted by what sounded like gunshots, prompting them to initiate a strategic sweep of the vicinity. Guided by the direction of the gunshots, they arrived on an almost deserted street, where a taxi was observed traversing the area. Reacting swiftly, the officers accelerated, overtaking the taxi and discerning the presence of several minors inside. Recognizing that the police were in pursuit, the young individuals accelerated, yet the officers were undeterred, maintaining their vigilance. And when they realized that escaping in the taxi wasn't going to be possible, they stopped and opened all 4 doors to run in opposite directions. They were only able to capture one suspect, and that was Luis Anibal. Luis was taken to the police station, and they began questioning him to get a confession, but he didn't utter a single word. Days passed, along with threats because the taxi he fled from belonged to a man who had been murdered a few hours earlier. Still, Luis remained silent until a group of boys came to visit him to see what was going on with him. This seemed odd to the police because they had kept this capture hidden, and only a few relatives knew that Luis was there. These boys, seeing that Luis couldn't get out, left the place. But the officers, seeing that the presumed suspects were minors and their profile matched perfectly, assigned an undercover officer to see what their next moves would be. Throughout the day, the detective saw that these boys seemed to spend the whole day together, hanging out in the streets. In the evening, they entered a nightclub, and more agents were called to see if they would take the bait that was about to be set. In the early morning, when the boys left the nightclub, a taxi passed nearby, and they stopped it. Several agents were already following the taxi, and indeed, these boys had the intention of assaulting the taxi driver, but he was also an agent, and practically the whole gang of terror was captured. But their leader, Juan, had not been with them. Under pressure, the boys confessed, but they claimed they were not responsible for the murders and that Juan Carlos was the culprit. Juan Carlos was the name Juan Fernando used to have a different identity as a criminal and protect his real identity. In contrast, Luis used the alias Santiago. The police began to investigate Juan Fernando Hermosa and found his address. At that time, Juan lived with Zoila, and Rafael was not at home. On January 14, 1992, in the early morning, several officers began to surround Juan's house and entered through a skylight. Juan realized this, grabbed his gun, and a shootout ensued. Unfortunately, since he was sleeping in the same bed with his mother, and she may not have heard due to her deafness, she stayed in bed. In the exchange of fire, Zoila was hit by 19 bullets, leading to her death. Juan attempted to escape, threw a grenade at the police, and when he was climbing out of a window to escape, he was captured. Subsequently, following Juan's grenade launch, testimonies surfaced from both Juan and the neighbors, attesting that it was, in fact, the police who had lobbed the grenade. Countless enigmas envelop the circumstances leading to Zoila's tragic fate. It raises questions about why she was swiftly transported away in an ambulance when it was patently evident that she had already departed from this world. Standard procedure dictates that, when someone is unmistakably deceased, they should remain at the scene for forensic evaluation. Upon his arrival at the police precinct, Juan unambiguously declared, as I quote, "I want to clarify that my name is Juan Fernando Hermosa Suarez, and on February 28th, I will celebrate my 16th birthday." This stratagem was employed to exploit legal provisions, given his status as a minor, and it elicited an explosion of media coverage. Juan ascended to a newfound level of notoriety, capturing the headlines in every newspaper. On numerous occasions, he participated in interviews for which he received compensation. Juan took all the blame for himself and wanted to leave his companions out of it. However, seeing that he also didn't want to receive many years in prison, he began to create excuses, claiming that a supposed general, who does exist, had hired him to commit all these crimes because of the death of his daughter, which was attributed to a supposed taxi driver. This was taken seriously because the other kids also started saying the same thing. The authorities were so stirred by this that they seriously began to investigate the general. They asked these kids about how he looked, and they said he was of average height and had prominent hair, but that wasn't accurate. He was tall and always had a military haircut. It also makes perfect sense that a general with all the connections in the world would hire a 15-year-old kid like Juan, who was a complete stranger. The authorities dismissed the accusations, and Juan began to make more excuses. Now he claimed that the taxi drivers were responsible for their own deaths. Clearly, he was still a child. He insisted that the last thing he wanted was to kill. He stated, "I asked them to stay still, that nothing would happen to them, but that didn't happen. Once again, I was threatened with a revolver, so I used my weapon. And a taxi driver tried to hit me with a lug wrench, so I was also forced to shoot." But even if that were true, this excuse wouldn't hold up because he had murdered 22 people by that point. There was no way he could be saved because he was young. It's not like he was suddenly going to turn his life around, and Juan confirmed this. At the time of his trial, Juan was already 16 years old and was sentenced to just 4 years at an orientation center because that was the maximum penalty for a minor in Ecuador. Juan underwent several psychological exams, which mostly described him as an organized psychopath. This type of psychopath tends to be natural leaders, and it was within 16 months of being in that center that Juan formed a gang and devised a plan to escape. He had a girl who had accompanied him in a previous taxi robbery arranged to meet him on the day of his visits. They had agreed that she would deliver a pistol to him so he could escape. In a juvenile center, the security wasn't as high, and Juan knew that at some point there would only be one guard watching the exit. When this happened, he seized the opportunity and shot the sole remaining guard with 5 shots, causing his death. Immediately, Juan and 10 other young people managed to escape from there. The news once again exploded, and somehow, Juan quickly managed to escape to Colombia. Reaching Bogota, he began to live off the sale of stolen jewelry, but being in a new country where he was also being pursued, he couldn't steal as easily as he could in Ecuador. So shortly after he was found, and tired of going hungry, he told the police, "Yes, I am Juan Fernando Hermosa," and he was sent back to Ecuador. He was temporarily placed in a high-security cell, but was soon returned to the same orientation center from which he had escaped before. However, this time, he didn't escape again. He didn't even serve the initial 4-year sentence they had given him, despite having killed a guard and escaped to Colombia. Many couldn't believe it, but in January 1996, Juan was already free, and this obviously caused a lot of resentment in many people who saw the judicial system as a failure. Juan returned to his childhood town, where he began to live with Rafael. In the early days, Juan seemed enthusiastic about finding a job, but no one wanted to hire him until Rafael contacted a friend who could give Juan a job in a bus collecting money. He started working and gradually began to enjoy the nightlife again, although it is assumed that he only went out to party and consume alcohol. On February 26, 1996, Juan had gone out with some friends to a bar around 10 p.m. At 12, the bar owner asked him to leave because the more the other customers consumed alcohol, the more they expressed their disgust for Juan, as his face and what he had done were known throughout the country. He had no choice but to board a bus and leave. 2 days later, Rafael received a call from the police, informing him that they had found what appeared to be his son's body near a river. The body was unrecognizable, not due to decomposition, but because it had been beaten, tortured, and assaulted in every possible way, even run over by a car with his hands tied with wire. He was only identified as Juan because he had his identification in his pockets, and next to the body, they had left a newspaper clipping that said, "The Hermoso Syndrome throughout the country." The body was found on the same day that Juan was supposed to turn 20. Some say that the perpetrators were contacts of the officers he had deals with, but it could have been anyone because this young man had made enemies from all sides. And that's the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon. Day after day, we are surrounded by the presence of criminals. We are spectators to the deepest darkness in human actions. and the bizarre reality that someone's suffering can be a form of pleasure. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Luke, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The case of Rui Pedro Teixeira. This horrible case took place in Lausada, a village situated in the northern region of Portugal, a location known for its vineyards, renowned green wine, and its distinction as the youngest population in the country. Nestled in the heart of the municipality bearing the same name, this village is in close proximity to the northwest coast of Portugal, a hub of summer enjoyment for tourists hailing from various corners of Europe. Within this quaint village, on January 28, 1987, Rui Pedro Teixeira was born. His parents, Filomena and Manuel, lauded his lively and jovial nature, along with his remarkable creativity and imagination. In a nutshell, this family, complete with their youngest daughter Karina, led a harmonious and contented life. Rui Pedro was a bundle of energy as a child. After completing his daily school assignments, he engaged in spirited soccer matches with his beloved cousin João André and other local children. His aspiration was to become a professional goalkeeper, and thus he consistently played in that role. Among the boys' other pastimes was cycling, and he could often be spotted zipping through the village to ensure he reached his daily math tutoring sessions punctually. However, one shadow cast over his otherwise serene childhood. Rui Pedro grappled with epilepsy. Manuel and Filomena were the proprietors of a driving school. One day, an ordinary young man named Afonso Dias arrived at the academy with aspirations of obtaining his driver's license. Filomena swiftly discovered that Afonso was facing financial hardship. Renowned for her exceptional empathy, she immediately sought ways to assist him. Initially, she provided him with clothing, and as their bond deepened, she extended the opportunity for him to work at the school, enabling him to earn extra income. 3 years passed, and thanks to Filomena's kindness, Afonso became a truck driver at just 22 years old. The family trusted Afonso so much that they relied on him to pick up Rui Pedro and Karina from school and bring them back home. To do this, Afonso used his brother's car, a Fiat Uno. As they spent time together every day, an unusual friendship blossomed between Afonso and Rui Pedro. The family didn't think it was strange, especially because Afonso had a youthful and childlike personality, which made him and Rui Pedro feel like brothers. However, the maternal grandparents viewed their relationship with suspicion. Manuel, on the other hand, was concerned about Afonso smoking around the child and considered him a bad influence. Worried about the consequences of this friendship, Manuel talked to Filomena about it, but she was convinced of Afonso's good character and believed he meant no harm. In the end, like in any good marriage, they reached a compromise, with Filomena agreeing to keep an eye on their interactions. On March 4, 1998, around 2 p.m., Rui Pedro rode his bicycle to his mother's workplace, which was just a few blocks away from home, to tell her that Afonso had invited him for a ride in his brother's car. Filomena wasn't happy about the idea and told him not to go. Instead, she sent him to a nearby field where his friends were waiting to play soccer, emphasizing the importance of making it to his 5 p.m. class on time. Though he was initially disappointed, Rui Pedro obeyed. He removed his bicycle helmet and headed to the soccer field. When he arrived, he found his friends, except for João André, whom his mother didn't allow to go out. Surprisingly, a black Fiat Uno driven by Afonso pulled into the field a few minutes later and stopped beside Rui Pedro. They had a short conversation, and then the child put aside his bicycle helmet, got into the car, and bid farewell to his friends through the passenger window with a simple gesture. Between 5 and 6 in the afternoon, a phone call shattered the family's peace and marked the start of the Teixeira family's worst days. Rui Pedro's tutor called to inform them that the boy hadn't attended his class. This was highly unusual since Rui Pedro had never missed a class before. Panic set in as his parents feared that an unexpected epileptic seizure might have rendered him unconscious, potentially causing severe brain damage if he didn't receive prompt attention. The news quickly spread throughout the village, and concerned residents sprang into action. They organized small search teams to cover the entire town. Soon, they found their first clue. A neighbor reported that around 3 p.m., he had spotted Rui Pedro's bicycle hidden among the bushes near the soccer field where he had been playing. Manuel and Filomena knew their son very well. They understood that his bicycle meant the world to him, and he wouldn't just leave it behind without a good reason. This led them to believe that Rui Pedro might have been taken against his will. Without hesitation, they rushed to the police station to report his disappearance. Upon receiving the report, the police launched their investigation by questioning the 3 boys who had been playing soccer with Rui Pedro. These friends recounted how a black car had entered the field to pick up their friend, identifying Afonso as the driver. They emphasized that Afonso's behavior had been strange and controlling toward their young companion. Initially, the officers doubted the children's accounts and chose to disregard their statements. However, they mentioned the misleading lead to the mother, which raised her suspicions. Filomena then mentioned Rui Pedro's request from that same afternoon to meet up with his friend. Immediately, everyone's attention turned to the truck driver, and the authorities proceeded to search his home. Afonso welcomed the officers who wanted to ask him some routine questions. As the last person who had seen the child, his statement could provide crucial information. However, the truck driver remained unusually calm and claimed not to have seen Rui Pedro. His reaction raised suspicion among the agents, given the numerous testimonies they had collected. Consequently, he was taken to the police station for further questioning. Once at the precinct, Afonso attempted to offer an excuse. He mentioned that his brother had asked him to take the car for its annual inspection, a mandatory requirement in Portugal for vehicles over 8 years old. However, records showed that he had never attended the scheduled appointment for that afternoon. Afonso persisted with his story, continuing to deny that the child had gotten into the car hours earlier. He admitted to a brief encounter of only 5 minutes with Rui Pedro before 2 p.m. Afterward, he claimed to have driven to a nearby town, which was about 15 kilometers from Lausada, and parked in front of a pharmacy. Afonso asserted that he stayed in the car for a while before deciding to take a stroll through the city, even mentioning that he admired the shop windows. When he grew tired, he drove to his girlfriend's house, arriving at 6:45 p.m. The woman lived in another village in the region, just 11 minutes away from Lausada. Meanwhile, at the police station reception, Rui Pedro's grandfather and cousin anxiously waited, determined to apply pressure to expedite the investigations. When Afonso's interrogation concluded, the two of them crossed paths with the suspect in the hallways. Upon seeing him, the grandfather desperately inquired about his grandson's whereabouts and offered anything in exchange for an answer. Afonso broke down in tears and insisted that he didn't know where the child was, but he warned that if they wanted to find him, it was essential to close all borders because he had probably been kidnapped and was on his way to a foreign country. The cousin also confronted Afonso and even mentioned a conversation they had with Rui Pedro the day before. The man's only response was to shout at the boy to be quiet once and for all. But the cousin remained unfazed. On the contrary, he continued the narrative with more details. Afonso had offered to take both of them to meet prostitutes and said that the meeting point would be a vacant lot. Following these events, a large-scale police investigation was launched in the region, involving local residents, firefighters, and even the assistance of bloodhounds to find the trail of the lost child. The officers believed that the boy might have had a seizure and was unconscious somewhere in the village. Or maybe he had simply wandered far away and couldn't find his way back. In summary, they considered it a case of a search and rescue, ruling out the hypothesis of kidnapping. Rui Pedro's family was outraged by this approach to the case. Due to the extensive dissemination of Rui Pedro's images in the local media, a sex worker recognized his face and contacted the local police. She stated without hesitation that on March 4, 1998, a black car had stopped in front of her on a desolate road. The driver offered her $10 to have sex with the little boy who accompanied him. She asked how old the boy was, and the man replied that he was old enough. The woman took him behind some bushes by the side of the road and looked for a private place where no one could see them. There was no sexual contact. The little boy was very terrified, crying nonstop and repeating over and over again that he wanted to leave. Seeing the child in such a distraught state, the sex worker couldn't help but feel compassion for him. She spent around 15 minutes trying to comfort him. She hugged him tightly and assured him that everything would eventually be all right. Amidst his sobs, he confided in her that he had been forced to attend that meeting. After emerging from the bushes, the child got into the car, and that was the last time she saw him. All signs pointed to a kidnapping, but even with this compelling witness statement, the police still hesitated to fully embrace this theory. In a desperate plea, the family begged the authorities to act urgently, stressing that each passing moment could be critical to the child's survival. The following morning, just after the court's opening, they managed to persuade the public prosecutor's office to request the intervention of the Judicial Police, a specialized agency responsible for investigating serious crimes like homicides, kidnappings, organized crime, and terrorism. Within 24 hours of Rui Pedro's last sighting, several judicial police officers arrived in the town. In the subsequent days, alongside family members and neighbors, they meticulously combed through the entire region, suspecting that Rui Pedro might have been left somewhere. The distribution of posters featuring the child's photograph escalated, reaching a national level, and the entire country of Portugal was deeply shaken by the case. The disappearance of the child sparked an overwhelming sense of collective sorrow. People referred to Rui Pedro as our boy or our little Pedro. Simultaneously, the family began receiving a barrage of phone calls, many of which were tormenting and distressing. Some claimed to have Rui Pedro in their custody, while others provided leads to his whereabouts that ultimately led nowhere. The most audacious callers even demanded a ransom payment. One particular and terrifying call featured a child whose voice sounded eerily similar to Rui Pedro's. Amidst screams and tears, he desperately called out for his mother. Citing the challenge of tracing all communications, the police decided not to pursue any leads that came through phone calls. The family's desperation grew, and the omission of potentially valuable information for the ongoing investigation appeared both inept and negligent. In April 1998, 1 month after the disappearance, a suspicion emerged. A renowned Portuguese journalist traveled to Disneyland in Paris with his wife and children for a report intended to be published in a widely read magazine with national circulation in Portugal. The article featured a series of portraits of him and his family at various park attractions. Among these images, one particular photograph raised alarm bells. In the background, a small child could be seen with a man dressed in red. Filomena and Manuel saw the photograph and firmly asserted that it was Rui Pedro. In September of the same year, a significant breakthrough occurred as the British police dismantled a pedophile network in an operation known as Operation Cathedral. This organization primarily operated online and served as a database with thousands of photos and videos depicting sexually abused children. This operation gained high-profile attention due to the unusually large amount of pornographic content possessed, produced, and distributed by this organization's members. Shockingly, they discovered more than 750,000 photos and 1,800 videos. Out of the 1,263 individuals featured in the seized material, only 17 were identified. 1 from Argentina, 1 from Chile, 1 from Portugal, 6 from the UK, and 7 from the United States. Filomena confirmed that Rui Pedro appeared in some of those photos, confirming that he was still alive, but nothing more. There were no coordinates or leads to his possible location. The British police speculated that members of the network had abused him on camera and then potentially harmed him. Over the next 13 years, the Public Ministry of Portugal built a case against Afonso, who consistently maintained his innocence. The trial began in November 2011. The key testimonies came from Rui Pedro's 3 friends, forming the backbone of the case. While the judge could verify certain facts presented by the prosecution, the court dismissed several testimonies due to a lack of conclusive evidence. In March 2012, Afonso was acquitted. On Rui Pedro's 27th birthday, January 28, 2014, a video was published that quickly went viral on social media. Some actors voluntarily participated in this video campaign. Their aim was to search for new clues about Rui Pedro's whereabouts, while also including the email addresses of the Northern Board of Judicial Police and the Portuguese Association for Missing Children to ensure that the young man's case would not fade into obscurity. This campaign had a broader goal of denouncing child trafficking for sexual exploitation. Returning to the legal proceedings, Afonso's freedom was short-lived. After an appeal by Rui Pedro's family in 2014, a new ruling from the Porto Court of Appeals sentenced him to 3 years in prison. This sentence was for inciting a minor to engage in involuntary sexual relations, but it was not related to the kidnapping or any other charges linked to the disappearance itself. Despite Afonso's defense attorney filing an appeal, this second ruling was confirmed by the Portuguese Supreme Court. On October 3, 2014, the resolution was ratified, and on March 18, 2015, Afonso was taken into custody after the police issued an arrest warrant. He was released on parole in March 2017, having served only 2/3 of his sentence. Afonso continued to maintain his innocence, claiming to be the victim of a grave injustice. 20 years after the disappearance in 2019, Rui Pedro was officially declared presumed dead. The police concluded their search as no further leads had emerged since Operation Cathedral, and the case had gone cold. The young man's whereabouts remain a painful mystery. Despite the ceaseless pain and the enduring void of not knowing what happened to her son, Filomena did not give up. In 2007, she founded the Association of Relatives of Missing Children. Rui Pedro's case highlighted a grave issue. We are confronted with a deeply serious phenomenon. Every year, 3 million children are kidnapped worldwide. In Portugal alone, there are over 60 missing children and minors. And that's the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another episode of Crime Analysis Central. See you soon.